Hello guys, it's about 8:30 at night, Friday night, and this is what I like to do. This is what I do on Friday nights. You guys go out to a club, I go to a service call. But actually, I have 3 children, so it's actually quiet here. So it's alright. I am checking out a unit. You see the fan is on, but we have no air coming out of the outlets. And we have a burning smell. So I'm going to use my expert troubleshooting and say the fan motor is fried. But we're going to go out there and take a look at it. See what's going on. It's going to be on a nice old unit that you guys may recognize. Here's our fan motor in question. As we can see, got 150 degrees right there, 136, 120, a lot of heat in there, up to 170 degrees. So it's been trying to start. I'm going to check the capacitor and see what it's doing. And then check into the motor to see if it's dead or what. She just took off a little bit right there. She's not running very well at all. Definitely not up to speed. And when I say she just took off, she took off without me doing anything. So I didn't propel it to move or what. We'll check the capacitor. There's a thermal protection on this motor, perhaps, but it's not doing very well at all. So we'll it's just interesting. We have a reading of 2.6 amps, 2.63. We're going to compare that against the data plate, what it is supposed to be, because it looks like it's either original motor or the actual factory replacement. If it's been changed, it fits the criteria of some of the ones I've seen from GE and Train. So it doesn't look like it's just a generic replacement. It doesn't have the reversing leads if it has been replaced. So we're going to see, it's 2.6, see what we can figure out from the data label. Our indoor fan motor is supposed to run 1.2 amps, and it's definitely not. So we're going to, you can see right there, good old metal data plate. See the old BWC, that's an old boy. We're going to check and see the capacitor rating. If it's bad, we'll change it out and check it again. Alright guys, we have a new capacitor on top. Our old one, it's meant to be a 7.5. It actually turned out to be a 0.0. So we put a new 7.5 on there. I actually think probably the motor is not doing very well, and the capacitor bit the dust because of that. But we're going to see here in a second. I have our amp clamp on the motor. It's not turned on yet because my battery was pretty low. Didn't want to waste it. And whenever it gets up and running, we'll kind of set the door. We'll have our door set up so we won't be sucking too much air directly to the side. We'll get a more accurate amp reading. Keeping in mind we're shooting for 1.2, and we were well above that. Of course, the capacitor wasn't doing very much at that time. So we'll see what it is like with a 7.5 microfarad capacitor that is functioning and with the door closed. Here's our motor up and running, and looky there. We're right about on target. I bet we put that door up there, we'll be below target. Let's check and see. Well, the good news is we're right at our amp rating. The bad news is we're not below the amp rating. The door, if it was all the way on, we might be a little bit below, but we're still running right at the amp rating on the data plate, which isn't very good. We're going to let the system run a little while. We'll put it into heat, and we'll see how she works. Well, I started the unit back up. The blower nice and strong. Not smelling the greatest, I'll tell you that. It fried a lot of that dirt that was sitting on top of the blower housing. Or not the blower housing, but the blower motor itself. It's still running, or it would be if I hadn't shut out the breaker. But then I came outside and the compressor wasn't running. So now I am going to start checking it. There's refrigerant in the machine. Did a quick check here just to make sure, and there's about 50 or 60 pounds in the machine, which actually isn't that far off since it's very cold outside. It's in the 30s. So that's not actually very far off of where it should be. But I'm checking the electrical compartment over here to see if we lost any electrical components that had to do with the compressor starting. Well, looking down here inside the electrical compartment, we can see a very old style contactor. This is a 1980s unit. This is the original contactor, so it's going strong after all these years. There's a couple capacitors in series together. They were actually the same rating, someone had just jumped two together, and actually I checked them and they were fine before, so I let them in place. So I'm going to check them again. We have these two in the picture right now as the compressor. And then there's the bottom one here is the fan motor, which I had changed at some point. Actually, I think I changed both of those at some point. But the big one stayed the same. So we're going to check it and see if it's still good. All the wiring looks like it's intact. Sometimes you'll have wires burnt off the contactor. You got to be aware of. And I traced them down to the compressor. We have our probes on the capacitor. It is a 20 microfarad capacitor, so it does check out. I will check the smaller capacitor. More than likely, even if that capacitor was weak, it would still start with this capacitor being good. But I'll go ahead and check it as part of routine. We have the other capacitor rated at 7.79. It's a 7.5 microfarad capacitor, so it's good to go. So we're going to put these back together. I'm going to start this thing up one more time to see if it restarts and to see what the amperage is, if any, of the compressor. Our fan motor is running. Compressor is not. We have a compressor that's not even attempting to run at this point. So we're going to try to ascertain why that is. The compressor has just come on. It is running. It's running at 9 amps right off the bat, which is a little high for a 2-ton compressor. I'm going to restart this, and I'm going to get our clamp, our gauges on this unit, and check and see what's going on while it's running. Alright guys, I have my gauges on. One is on the discharge, one on the true suction going back to the compressor. The noise you hear in the distance is a check valve. And let's see, this one's running about, let's see, 85 pounds compared to just under 100. Let it equalize out. Because on these old reciprocating compressors, even a few pounds difference between suction and discharge can cause it not to start. They're very sensitive to that sort of thing. This is why you might put a hard start on a reciprocating compressor that has a TXV added to it, indoor TXV, to help it start in case it's like a hard shut-off TXV where there's a higher pressure in that discharge line initially, and it wouldn't be able to start against that pressure. So you use the hard start or start assist or whatever they want to call it. Kick start, hard start, compressor saver, whatever. We'll give it a couple seconds here and we'll fire it back up again. Alright guys, we kicked it back on. The fan only is running again. We're going to give the compressor a second to see if it'll catch up. Sometimes after it runs for a few minutes, the pressure equalizes a little bit more and the compressor kicks in. Or maybe it's not going to kick in at all. Who knows? Maybe she's gone. I'm going to go take a look inside, check our airflow and some of the other outlets. And I'll come back and check this out again. Okay guys, what I'm doing now is I'm taking a few temperatures across the reversing valve. This is discharge line going to the evaporator from the compressor. I'm seeing if our temperature stays the same from this point, which would be, let's say if it's 100 degrees here, goes across the reversing valve and comes out, it should be 100 degrees. If there's leaking inside the reversing valve or the reversing valve is not seated properly, maybe a drop in temperature indicates that. Same thing on the other side of the reversing valve. We have the line coming back into the valve and going to the accumulator because it's a heat pump. If you have this line coming in at, let's say, 40 degrees, 40 degrees and coming out, let's say 48 degrees, then you can assume that you're losing some, or you're gaining some heat from the discharge line leaking internally. So that's a good way you can tell. If you're not getting the proper cooling or heating, sort of a tip off, you can check the reversing valve. They go bad from time to time pretty dramatically, and sometimes it's just more of a subtle thing. Like I think the case is here. We're going to check and see if that's correct. Starting to get some frost in the line. It's pretty chilly out here. We're in the 30s. But still running pressures, 190 over 50 or so. So we should definitely be freezing up because we're below the freezing point of the refrigerant. But right now I'm just going to let that temperature settle out. Don't look like they're very close right now. I'm going to switch the probes and make sure the probes are calibrated properly. If one probe reads, let's say, 68 right here, and the other probe reads 78 on the discharge line, then accordingly we should be able to switch them and get the same temperatures. Probes have known to be faulty, So you definitely want to double check your probes. You can put them on the same line to make sure they match up. That's fine too. But just double check them, especially if it's a sensitive measurement. Like you're doing, let's say you want to do temperature across something like a dryer. You want your probes to be pretty accurate. Here we have our liquid pressure now. Same spot, about 190 or so. We have our suction pressure at about around 50. We're looking down here at our temperatures. We have 82 on the discharge and about 7 degrees on the discharge after the reversing valve. That's bad. That means the reversing valve is definitely not functioning properly. We can try the old trick here and what I call the scientific method. You can do like this, except usually you want to use something a little bit heavier. See if it shifts all the way. I don't think that's an issue. Alright guys, I'm starting to break my stuff down here. I took the suction line gauge off. I'll take the liquid line after I shut it off. Just running through the temperatures one more time. In summary, our reversing valve passing a little bit of the hot gas, and you wouldn't know it by the ice, but it's definitely dropping off in temperature, going into the evaporator. The ice, I think, is mainly due to the fact that this coil needs another cleaning. I guess it's just dirty as hell back here, because I cleaned it in the spring and it looked pretty good, but now, you can see it down there, it looks pretty dirty right there. I need to go ahead and clean it again. But just a little alcove out here in between two buildings. Kind of dirty. A lot of children's play crap is crammed back here sometimes, so it gets dirty. Here's our TXV. This TXV actually functions in heating and cooling. I've seen some trains like that. I've seen some rims like that. They use the same TXV for both cycles. And it just there's different routings for the refrigerant piping using check valves. So obviously we have some very cold temperatures coming back on these lines. Perhaps some liquid that is still flashing in these lines as it gets back toward the compressor. Not really good for the compressor. Definitely probably improve after the coil's clean. We're going to shut this thing down because it is pretty cold. It's about 10:30 now. I have to get on home, and luckily that's right across the street. You see my house right across the street there with the lights in the window. That's me. I'm going to head back home, relax, maybe take a hot bath, and drift off into dreamland. I'll see you guys on the next one. I'm a little bit dirty, rough around the edge. Don't say you didn't know what you'd get. A little bit dirty, black and blue, and it's all been proven a time or two. Yeah, I don't buy the lucky sevens, but I'll tell you what is true. An honest day of labor, this ain't no prize to you. I could spend 1,000 summers working to the bone, but if it ain't for shiny diamonds, I'll be working them alone.